Hey everybody, my name is Asia and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing a spring recommendations video. So today I'm going to be doing a spring recommendations video, as I said, and I am really excited for this. Spring, even though I hate the pollen, I hate the flowers, it's actually one of my favorite seasons, I think. I honestly get into a lot of depression in the fall, which even though that's my favorite season, I do. And then a lot of the winter, especially like February. So like when it starts to like warm up and feel like spring, like I just get happier because I know that my seasonal depression is fading away. And I was talking to a lot of different people about like what they think a spring book is. And it was honestly really hard for me because I feel like a lot of the things that I associate with spring, a lot of people associate with summer. Like I associate spring with water when a lot of people associate the summer with water. A lot of like the adventurous fantasy that I associate with spring, a lot of people associate with summer. But for me, when I was a kid, because I was raised as an only child, my sister was 9 years older than me and she didn't live with me. As a kid, I would always play on the playground with my friends and we'd have like adventures and stuff like that during the spring. And then during the summer, I didn't really see my friends as much and I was kind of alone just watching cartoons. I did go outside too, but I didn't have like the same fun adventure that I had with my friends in the spring while we were still at school and we would just play after school. So for me, I associate that more with the spring than the summer, but I know a lot of people associate it with the summer. So I'll be talking about 11 books today, but I kind of have them divided up. So for me, what I think of for spring books is obviously things that have like flowers, nature, gardening, stuff like that. That's very spring. Everybody knows that. Then also for me, I think of like lighthearted contemporary with like romance in it maybe, but also really, really emotional ones that are kind of gonna like destroy my heart. I think of both. I like to be emotionally destroyed and I also like something a little bit more fun-hearted. And then I also put one fantasy on here to kind of give you that little taste of like the adventure that's coming in summer. I also feel like cozy mysteries are really good for this time of year as well, because I feel like they're really good for like spring and fall. So I put one cozy mystery on here that's not very like fallish at all to try and like give you a little taste. So first I'm gonna start with like the most spring books to me, and that is obviously like the ones that are like naturey, garden. So the first one that I have for that is Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford, and this is one of my favorite books. We read it for Stacks of Strange, I think in 2021, and it became one of my favorite books. I really, really love this book. It is definitely very naturey. They use a lot of medicinal herbs and stuff like that in this book, and they also like garden a lot. In this we follow our main character Ada and her father, and they are not really human but kind of human, and they just live alone, kind of separate from the rest of the town. I'm thinking, if you've seen The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, how they have their own little house, the mortuary, kind of separate from the town, it's kind of like that. And they have like that garden too, you know, it's kind of giving that. They are known for helping people cure their illnesses by literally opening up their bodies and like messing with stuff. Like they actually open up. This book has a lot of magical realism, which is something I also associate with this time of year. I just don't read a lot of magical realism, but this has a lot of that. And so they open up their bodies to heal, and they call them the cure. The cures are basically human, and Ada and her father are kind of human but like more immortal. They have like these magical powers and they're just a bit different. And one day Ada starts up a affair with this guy named Samson, who is one of the cures, and her father does not like this at all, but you know, she does what she does. And Samson also has a pregnant sister. You can see from that one little synopsis, it's not very plot driven. You don't know where it's gonna go, but we just follow them, and it's a pretty short book, which I think is also kind of good for the spring. I really, really just love this book so much, again with the magical realism and also how they use like the medicine and herbs to like help cure people. And as I said, they have like a garden kind of, and it's just very naturey. They're out in nature a lot. So this book definitely fits the springtime because I feel like just like gardens and nature and all that to me is just like spring. Like that's just very spring, because who wants to do that in the summer? It's way too freaking hot. So the next book in the kind of like magical realism plant category is House of Hollow by Krystal Sutherland. I read this book and absolutely adored it. It's another Stacks of Strange pick. This one is definitely more horror than it is magical realism, but it's still fantastic. And in this book we follow our main character Iris, and Iris and her sisters, when they were younger, they got taken up off the street and they were gone for like a week or something, and then they just like appeared back at where they disappeared out of thin air, but they come back a little different. especially as they start to grow older, their hair is like white, like they always stay slim. They're just a little bit different, a little bit otherworldly. That's the best way I can describe it. And one day when she's now 17, her sister Gray disappears. And this is weird for Gray to not be active on social media. People are really concerned because she is kind of like an influencer. And so people are really concerned. So Iris and her other sister decide to investigate where Gray went and what happened to her. And so, as I said, this one's more horror, but you can even see from the cover it has a lot of flowers, and the writing is flowery, not just in the sense that it's like lyrical, but it uses flowers and plants a lot in the writing, a lot as like metaphors, similes, like things are described in plant-like ways and symbols, which I feel like makes this book very spring. It's like a good horror for the spring. I feel like there's not that many horror thrillers that are good for the spring, but this one, fantastic, because it just has like those elements in that writing of just plants and flowers being kind of woven into the whole book. My next book for this category is A History of Wild Places by Shea Ernshaw, and when I read this book, it originally really gave me Follow Me to Ground vibes. I always describe it as Follow Me to Ground meets The Year of the Witching because it has like cults and something to do with this forest. And in this book we follow a character named Travis, and he's only really in here in like the first chapter, but Travis is a like PI kind of known for helping find missing people. So he gets hired by this woman's family, her name is Maggie, and he is trying to hunt down where she went. But then eventually he also disappears. So that's why we only follow him for one chapter, but we're getting introduced to the thought of this woman disappearing. We kind of flip to this place called Pastoral, and there is a man named Theo, and he stumbles along Travis's truck. So that's how he's connected to it. And so he's trying to figure out what this means, and he is not supposed to interact with this truck at all because in this pastoral community they stay with themselves and they're not supposed to go beyond the boundaries of the trees because they have this thing called the rot. And if you catch the rot from the trees, it can spread to everybody else in the community and kill them. So they are not really supposed to go outside the community, but Theo doesn't really listen, and he is really interested in all the things that are in Travis's truck because it's definitely telling a story of who Travis is, why he was there, and he's trying to piece things together. So we just kind of follow this community as they go through trials and tribulations, and as I said, it's very cult-like. That's how people describe this book, as a cult book, and it is to a certain degree, but it's really focusing again on that magical realism aspect as well with the rot. And some of these characters do have powers, like Travis, I forgot to mention, he has this affinity for when he touches things that belong to people, he can kind of like see a little bit about them, and so he has that power. Some of the characters in Pastoral have some magical powers, and they also really focus on like herbs in nature as well, and they have like this pond that they bathe in, but they, as I said, the trees are like a big aspect of this, as well as rain. Like they think the rain has rot in it too. So this really does focus though on nature because they don't really have power or anything like that. They're in a cult, they don't have power. And so I think this one with the magical realism as well as like the more naturey aspects really just makes it a good spring book. So next I'm going to transition into the more emotional romances that I think are good for this time of year, and I happen to have two by the same author, so I'm sorry, but if you know me, you know I love both these books. So the first one that I have that I feel like kind of leans into the last category as well is Wolfsong by TJ Klune. I absolutely adore, live, breathe this book. It is one of my favorite books of all time. It is so fantastic, and this is a paranormal shifter romance, which you know you would normally think is more for around like obviously the fall, but I just feel like because of how emotional it is, which I just associate with the spring, and as well as this is like they are out in nature a lot because you know they're shifters, they're out in like the woods, and I feel like the woods combined again with that more emotional aspect makes it really good for the springtime. And I also read this actually in July, which is the summer, but it was pouring the whole time I was reading this outside, and it was cooler because of that rain, and it just felt like the spring because I feel like April showers, you know, like we associate spring with like rain, storms, and also flowers and sun, but so I feel like because of that it kind of makes it feel more like springy to me. But this book we follow our main character Ox, and when Ox was 12 his dad left him and told him that Ox was never going to amount to anything. And then when Ox is 16, this new family moves into his town and he meets their little boy. I believe he's like 8 or 9 at the beginning of the book, and the little boy's name is Joe, and he went through a traumatizing event about 2 years prior to the book that made him not speak to anybody, but then he ends up speaking to Ox, and so they kind of develop a friendship. And then he finds out that this family is like werewolves, they're shifters, and they kind of take him in, and they are his pack. They really, it's like very much like found family, and so they really just take him in and treat him as one of their own, and that's his found family, that's his pack. It's so beautiful. And then when Ox is in his 20s and Joe, I think, is 17 or 18, they start to develop a romantic relationship. But before then, they do not have any romantic feelings for each other. Obviously, he's a child, but they really don't. They have like a 6 to 7 year age gap, which isn't bad. It's just bad if you're like 16 and the other person's 9. But the romance really does not start at all until Joe is like 17, 18. And this book is just so beautiful. I literally described it as it tore my heart and like stomped on it, and like it just shredded it into pieces. I felt so destroyed and distraught. I think this was one of the only books, if not the only book, that made me cry last year. And it wasn't just like tears running down my face. Like, I was sobbing for hours. This book absolutely destroyed me, but I just loved it so much. And again, because they're werewolf shifters and they're out running around, they like to train a lot and they go out and they run through nature. If you kind of think of like Twilight, and you know how like the werewolves in there, like they're like always outside in like the woods and stuff. It's like giving that, but like the whole book. And it's just so fantastic, and I loved it so much. So the next book that I have for the emotional romance category, as I said, I have 2 books by the same author, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I also love this one. I honestly think I do like Wolfsong more, and I feel like Wolfsong is better for the spring, I'm not even gonna lie, but this one I think is also really good for the spring because it's just really emotional and heartfelt. So in this book, we follow our main character, Linus, and so he works for like this foster care system that's for magical children. It's literally called the Department in Charge of Magical Youth, and so he like oversees like foster homes and stuff like that. But besides that, Linus does not really have anything going for his life, and so he has a pretty boring life. He doesn't do much, but he's happy with it. He's content, but he could definitely have some more hobbies and interests, I'm not gonna lie. But he one day gets this confidential classified case where he is going to go visit and oversee a foster home for a little bit that houses the most dangerous children on earth. Like, one of them is literally, his name's Lucy, and he is Lucifer as a child. They literally live on an island by themselves, and so he goes there and he kind of opens up to these children and realizes that even though the world perceives them as dangerous, they kind of just want love and they are normal children still. He also does not expect to have some sort of connection with the overseer of this foster home named Arthur, and so we kind of just follow Linus as he is in this home with these children and Arthur. And I just feel like this one has like magical vibes, which is just perfect for this time of year. As I said, I just love the magical realism in spring, and this one definitely has magical realism because of all of like the kids having their different powers and the magical youth, which I feel like is what really makes it a springy book as well, again, as the more emotional aspect that is brought into this book. It's like not as serious as like Wolfsong, like it's not gonna like break your heart, but these children, again, like they want love, and it does just talk about some themes that I think make it more of emotional, especially because this is like a bit of a romance, but it's not completely. I would say romance is secondary, and it focuses more on the children and their relationships with Linus and their relationships with each other and with Arthur. And I think that is just, it's so sweet and tender, and it's just so beautiful for spring. And the last book that I have in this category is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I honestly feel like any of Colleen Hoover's really emotional romances were good for this. Of the people that I asked, a lot of people say they associate Colleen Hoover with spring. And again, I think it's just like we associate like more emotional romances with spring. And this one is my favorite. Well, I've only read this one and Ugly Love, and I did not really like Ugly Love. I know some people love it, and I'm so glad for them, so you may want to check out that one as well. I think I could definitely see why people would like it. I don't think it's a bad book by any means. It just, this one I prefer much more. And in this book we follow our main character Lily, and Lily has an abusive father, and he abuses her mom like no other. He doesn't abuse her, but he definitely abuses her mom. And at the beginning of this book, Lily's father dies, and she goes to his funeral and really just stands up there for like 2 minutes and doesn't say anything about him because he's a bad person, and she doesn't want to give him any good words just because he's dead. That doesn't mean that she has any obligation to forgive him for what he's done. So then that night, she knows everybody's kind of mad at her for doing that, so she just is trying to chill, and she goes up to this rooftop of this building, and there she meets this man named Ryle, and her and Ryle kind of click. They have a little bit of a moment. They play a little game where they like tell each other truths and stuff like that, and so they have this one night, but they don't see each other for a very long time. They don't get each other's numbers or anything like that. But one day she moves to Boston, I believe it is, and she's starting a flower shop there. And I love this flower shop because it is like flowers for people who don't like flowers. And again, like the flowers, spring, you see the correlations that are happening. And when she is opening this flower shop, this woman walks in because she's interested and is like, hire me. So she does. And then it turns out that Ryle is this woman's brother. So that is how Lily and Ryle reconnect a couple years later. We also follow these letters that Lily wrote to Ellen DeGeneres when she was 15, and these mostly talk about her first love, which was Atlas. He was a homeless boy that she fell in love with at 15, who kind of helped her through the domestic abuse that was happening in her household. And this book is full of domestic abuse, like in more ways than one, and so if that's going to trigger you, I'd just be cautious going into this book. So this is like kind of a crossover from the last category to this category. This is a YA romance, and it does touch on certain topics, but it's not like super emotional. I think it is a little bit more fun in some regards, but that is the Henna Wars, and I absolutely love this book. It is so good, and I really need to read Hani and Issue's Guide to Fake Dating. But this one, I don't know why I associate it with spring so much, but I just do. I think it's just a really good like YA romance that's fun but also has commentary, and it's just, I think it's really good for this time of year. And so in the Henna Wars we follow this girl named Nishta, and Nishta is a Muslim girl who is a lesbian, but her family kind of oppresses that because they believe that Muslim girls can't be lesbians. And so Nishta's life is kind of hard just because of that, obviously, and a childhood friend comes into her life and brings this girl Flavia in with her, and Nishta immediately falls for Flavia. But there's kind of a rivalry there because there is a school project, I think for like their business class, where they have to start up like little businesses, and Nishta decides to do henna, and henna is a part of her culture, so she's really good with henna, and again it's part of her culture, so she decides to do henna. And so does Flavia and her childhood best friend, and their business significantly succeeds more than Nishta's, but Nishta's the one who henna is a part of her culture. And so it is a romance. It is an LGBTQ sapphic person of color romance, and it's just so good, and I absolutely recommend it. The next more fun romance I'm going to mention is Lore Olympus, and this is a graphic novel I've been talking about a lot because I really like Lore Olympus, but it is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and there is going to be multiple volumes. So in this first volume that's just out now, it's just a lot of mutual pining. It is very modern day mythology, so like they go to a party, and somehow because of some people, Persephone ends up in the back of his car like asleep, and so Hades just drives home not knowing that she's in the back of his car, and then he looks back there and realizes that she's back there, and he kind of like takes care of her, and that's how they meet. There is a lot more of this graphic novel out, so if you want to get So there's a lot more of this graphic novel out if you do want to like continue on and see past this mutual pining. I have not yet, but I plan on it. But there's a lot of bright colors, especially with Persephone because she is pink, and the bright color scheme here I feel like really lends well to spring. And as well, Persephone is the goddess of fertility. Fertility is a very spring thing because that's when growth is starting. And so I feel like this one is very good for a quick read in the spring. This next romance is like a bit of a weird one to include on this list, or I feel like some people might not understand why it's on this list, but it is A Lesson in Thorns by Sierra Simone, and I think that this one is really good for spring because it's giving cottagecore in a way. But in this book we follow our main character Poe, and she becomes a librarian at this place called Thorn Chapel, and she's trying to stay away from the owner of Thorn Chapel. His name's Auden, and she's trying to stay away because they have like connections. She does not want to be involved with Auden at all. She's really just there to try and figure out what happened to her mother there 12 years ago because she like disappeared there, and so she's not exactly sure, so she's trying to like hunt down information in this library as to what happened. And she does not really succeed at staying away from Auden because she gets wrapped up with him and also his other friends. I believe it's 3 other friends or 4 other friends, and this one is a bit like polyamorous. I don't know if it's and this one's a bit polyamorous. I wouldn't call it a reverse harem, but it's definitely polyamorous. And I just feel like with like the library, it's very like crumbly. I feel like it's like very much like kind of giving spring cleaning. I don't know how else to describe it, but I feel like this book, like if you in the spring, I feel like is when you would go to like a library and you would like fix it up and like make it new and nice for like the coming warm months. And so that's why I put it here. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like it just really fits for spring. So the one fantasy that I'm including on this list is Amari and the Night Brothers. And obviously in this book we follow our main character Amari. So Amari's brother disappeared one day out of nowhere, and Amari really wants to know what happens to him, but one day she gets like this magical suitcase that shows up to her, and it basically tells her that her brother was a part of like this big corporation that deals with like magic, and that magic actually exists in the world. And so she's like, oh no, like I have to go there to figure out where my brother went. So obviously she goes and she becomes a part of their school that they have, because this is kind of like the FBI, like think Men in Black but like magic edition, and it's so fun. But there's also a school, so she attends the school. A lot of stuff ensues, and I feel like this one is perfect because, as I said, in spring I feel like we had a lot of excitement as children because it's about to be summer, we're about to be on summer break, we can go outside with our friends and play. And this one is in middle grade, so it kind of brings that childhood excitement back. But then also she's still in school, so that's why I wanted to include this one, because it's not like completely like she's in the middle of summer, she's still in school. So I feel like it's just like the little taste of fantasy that you need. And the last book I'm going to mention is The Cozy Mystery, and that is Arsenic and Adobo. I absolutely love this one. I know some people didn't, but I feel like they were expecting something different than it actually was. But this book we follow our main character Lila. So Lila is getting over a breakup and she just moves back to her hometown. She starts to work at her auntie's restaurant, and when she's there, the landlord comes and is like, ayo, like, what's up, like you gotta pay your bills. And they're like, all right. And he actually ends up like having an allergic reaction and dying. So she knows it's not her. She knows it's not her auntie. So she's trying to figure out who killed this landlord, because everybody thinks that it's her or her family, and the police are treating them like the only suspect. So she is on the hunt to figure out who killed this landlord so she can clear her and her family's name. And this book is just so fun and fast-paced. I think maybe I associate this one with spring because, again, I read it in the summer when it was pouring rain and it just felt so springy, and I think maybe that's why. But again, I feel like cozy mysteries are really good for this time of year, but this one I really like because I know a lot of like summer cozy mysteries and a lot of like paranormal cozy mysteries, which I feel like are respectively summer and fall. So I wanted to choose one that didn't really have anything related to summer or fall. I will definitely talk about those in their respective recommendations videos when the seasons come around. So those are all the books that I have to recommend to you for this spring. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you think any of these are not good for spring down below, and also if you have any spring recommendations, let me know down below. If you've made it to the end of this video, leave the little flower emoji down below. But that's all that I have for this video today, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye everybody. Trying to look like you winning. I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking in moments we live in. Yeah, you got the nerve to be on me, faking your life for the IG. If you got my number, don't add me, cause baby I'm on high.